But one of the things that brings to mind, I'm sort of in the midst of this fight with this question of esotericism. There's some important questions involved in it. I think my intervention may have something to do with that. But the way I've been putting this of late, maybe even for the past year, sort of tucked away in like footnotes when I write, is in theology, the exoteric is what is served first, like in a very important way. I think this is true for philosophy in its own way too, because of the nature of the habit of first principles, right? That there's a certain grounding in common sense. I mean, I'm not Mortimer Adler, but I mean, it's along the lines of what he would say. But especially for theology, because of theology's birth in the heart of the church, which is, effectively the lived life of the received message of faith from the magisterium and in the liturgy, right? Theology comes forth from the docile assent to authority, and in a sense has to resolve itself back to its principles, which came from really a pre-discursive origin, which is shared then with all the faithful. Which is not something to say that all that labor is useless, but somehow in the culture of doing theology, there should be something in the culture of theology that indicates the fact that this is all really just a service. It's in a sense, a lower formality, right? And so I guess coming back to my original thing I said to you, I was just trying to stir the pot up, but I think something very perverse happens because of the pressures of the academy. Like immensely perverse. Even if we're not looking to cast stones out about different institutions, but even good Catholic institutions that are at the size of a university struggle with this because of the immense headwinds of just existing in the university system. So I think there's a temptation, and it's sort of an older narrative, to blame this on 19th century Germans letting a mind virus out of the universities and coming here and creating Johns Hopkins, and then the rest of the world is ruined by the research university. But sometimes when you look at this through like sort of the schizophrenic mind I have, being a Thomist in the East, right? So that I live in both worlds, as you sort of, I look out of my eyes going two different directions. But there's such a difference of theological culture between the two worlds, the East and the West, for various historical reasons, various economic reasons, various urbanization reasons, that there's a pressure in the West that the growth of the universities, it causes a significant change in what you think like Theos Logos is. What's the locus of doing theology? It's too simple to say, it's just in the monasteries beforehand. I mean, it's too simple of a thing, right? Because obviously, what's the role of the cathedral life, right? So obviously. But at least there's this unique pressure that perhaps we've never quite totally figured out how to grapple with, which is fine. Things take with humans centuries upon centuries. La Burdette says at one point, we've never really totally grappled with the effects of the Aristotelian corpus. And he's writing this 1940, the effects of what that did on intellectual life. But there's a certain pressure that I think you can even see it in the history of the Western universities that tends toward this detachment, right? It first starts in the Faculty of Arts, but think about what theology is like in the Western universities by the time you hit the 14th century. You're not even hitting you're not even doing commentaries on the whole of Peter Lombard's sentences anymore. Go look at, I'm choosing Occam not because I'm trying to make him the bête noire like everyone does, because they like to have simple narratives that they can have one person to blame. Sorry, my commentary. But it's not just for that reason. It's it's a very good example of what the status of doing theology is like. By the time you're at him, there's a huge kind of methodological prologue to the commentary. The first part is covered at some length of the sentences. But by the time you get to, books 3 and then the stuff on the sacraments, it just peters off. And eventually they just don't. They just don't even do it. And some people see it as, again, it's kind of the simple theory of the downfall of all things because of nominalism, right? They blame it on that, right? But another part of it is the discussion became among the theology masters for their own sake. And there's a certain detachment that occurs there. Now, it's a wrong-headed narrative to say that this is just sort of this is kind of this Western evil of university theology, which just ought not to exist. The later need that the Orthodox world had to actually have a developed theological culture, this continual feel that they have to reform that way, that happens from the Reformation onward, that they are aware of the fact you have to have this cultural institution for handling these sorts of questions, it just never quite develops the same way as the West, indicates that you can't just dismiss this as just the perversion of Christianity, but it's a really unique pressure, and I think it's ubiquitous. I think that the university kind of has to be reined in to not let it destroy theology.